Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 Iowa caucus. I'll be giving my, interpretations of the results, giving some analysis and predictions for the future in the GOP primary. And I'll be talking about the candidates here, talking about what I think this means for Trump, DeSantis, Haley, and we'll just be doing a little bit of, GOP primary talk. So, in case you missed it, Trump won big on Monday night, as expected in Iowa. And this wasn't really a result that I think was particularly interesting. Obviously, the real race was for second place, and that one, I guess, went to DeSantis. DeSantis, is going to finish around 2,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley. And if you watch my prediction video for the released on, I think, Monday morning for this, these caucuses, I said Haley was going to finish second, so I was wrong on that. I thought she'd probably be getting 21, 22%. Rather, it was DeSantis. But I was right that Trump would get the majority. I said he'd crack 50. He got 51. And then I said Ramaswamy was going to drop out after Iowa. And he dropped out, I think, the night of. So, realistically, I think... Well, first, I do want to talk about Ramaswamy, actually, because he did play a role in this race, and I would be doing him a disservice if I didn't talk with him at all. Ramaswamy was, to me, a campaign that never really made sense. When you look at the lane, when you look at a primary, there's generally a lane for each candidate, right? And in this primary, Trump was obviously the favorite. It goes without saying that he had a lane, he had a path to victory. DeSantis was the, I'm conservative, I'm just as right wing as Trump, but I'm, without the rhetoric that's cost him in the past. I can win an election, he can't. I'm a governor of Florida. I've done a lot of things that I think Republican voters really like. Haley, a bit more moderate, still very conservative. She's, the smart electable choice. Ramaswamy, or not Ramaswamy, I'm just going down the list here. Red state governors like Asa Hutchinson and Doug Burgum, who are from small states, not really that, well-known figures, but they can say, look, I am competent. I've been effective as governor, and I've legislated policy that is very, very right-wing, on these issues because I've been in a red state. And then you also have Mike Pence, who's kind of taking up who took up the conservative, religious evangelical base. And so each candidate had a lane. And I'm not saying that they were all realistic. Obviously Mike Pence wasn't winning. Obviously Asa Hutchinson didn't have a chance, but they all had the argument. What was Vivek's argument is what I don't get, because Vivek, what really didn't make any sense to me was he was Trump, just Trump. He wasn't Trump without Trump. He wasn't Trumpism without Trump. He wasn't, he didn't really have anything different. To me, he was just Trump, but maybe even more right-wing, because he was, I think he went further on some of the climate change stuff. He went further on, some of the stuff, I think, with relation to abortion. And he, by the way, he was controversial, but he had his moment in the sun where he really started to pick up ground in the polls after the first debate when, the world was, really was, met him. And so, to me, he was just Trump, and I don't know why, as a GOP primary voter, you would vote for Trump or would vote for Vivek when you can just vote for Trump. It just doesn't make any sense to me, because he's not more electable. He's not, a figure who's been a governor. He doesn't really have anything to tout that Trump wouldn't. And so for that reason, I don't know what he thought he was going to be able to do, because I don't think that anyone thought Ramaswamy had a chance, right? Ramaswamy was just like the other candidates. He was a long shot, and this was always Trump's primary. And so, for that reason, I don't really know why he ran, unless he's planning on running for Senate or some other office in the future. So I think Ramaswamy really just did this to kind of get his name out, because I don't really think he thought he had any chance of winning, and I don't think that he ever had a lane. People who like Ramaswamy just might like him. They like Trump more. Trump's been there. He's been the incumbent. He's going to win every time. And so Ramaswamy dropping out and endorsing Trump, I think, was the least surprising thing that came out of this caucus. Behind maybe Asa Hutchinson getting 0.2% of the vote despite still being in the race. And so I think that Ramaswamy's endorsement is going to help Trump. Obviously, his voters are much more Trumpy than they are, pro DeSantis or pro Haley. But so that's Iowa. Again, Trump did well. 51% of the vote. It's roughly what I expected he was going to get. He did lose a county by one vote, which I think is probably a little annoying for him, because he lost Johnston County to Nikki Haley. But he did win Dallas County, which was one to watch. He also won Story County, which, was close. And then Polk County, the largest in the state. That's where Des Moines is. Trump did well there. The precinct map I will look at later, most likely, but let's actually, we'll look at it now. We can go through this here, but if it loads, because sometimes it won't load. But yeah, here we go. But as as you can see in the city Des Moines, or of Des Moines, not Des Moines. What am I saying? But Ramaswamy won a precinct. But in the city itself, I think Trump did pretty well. And then some of these towns outside in the suburbs, you look at these precincts, they were more DeSantis or Haley. Then obviously you go over to Johnson County, which I believe is where Iowa City is. Haley did well there. I think that might be a college town. And then you go over to Ames, which is where I believe Iowa State is. Haley also did well. But in these rural areas, you can see really in everywhere except for the college towns and the suburbs, Trump dominated Iowa. So this was not a close caucus, 51% of the vote, very, very pro-Trump. And that was not a surprise. Now, I do want to talk about New Hampshire, because New Hampshire is the next primary. It's a primary, not a caucus, which I like. Obviously, people who've watched my channel for a little bit know how I feel about caucuses. I think they're a waste of time. I think we just do primaries. But whatever, this is a primary. It's happening on the 23rd. I believe that is next Tuesday. Could be Monday, but it's beginning of next week. So I'll be predicting and covering that. But here's the thing. New Hampshire is close than Iowa. New Hampshire is going to be a bit more interesting than Iowa because it's kind of a weaker spot for Trump. And actually, if you go back to 2020, when Trump was even more of the incumbent, when he had an even bigger lock on this primary, Trump didn't really do that well in New Hampshire. Bill Weld, Bill Weld got 9% of the vote. Trump, as an incumbent, you should be getting more than 84% against a no-name challenger. And Bill Weld, really did better than a lot of people thought. And I remember, watching that and being like, wait a minute, why did that happen? And so, New Hampshire, I think, as it was in all of 2020, kind of a weak spot for Trump. And I think when you look at the polls, they show this too. Haley's been really surging in the polls in New Hampshire. DeSantis obviously took the initial second place, kind of spot. But Haley has really surged. And that's because New Hampshire, I would say, is a more moderate state. It's not super Trump, even among the Republicans there. I think they're a bit more libertarian, a bit more, look, we're moderate. We're not necessarily into the Trump rhetoric. And obviously, Trump will still likely win the primary. I'd be shocked if he didn't win New Hampshire. But the polls have it closer than I think a lot of people were expecting. Haley's only 13% behind Trump, and Trump's well behind 50%. He was at 53, 54% in Iowa, I believe, on the day of the caucuses, and he is only at 44%, rounding up right now. And so he'll campaign there more. He was in Iowa, this past weekend. I think he'll probably spend more time in New Hampshire. I think he will, probably hit more likely than not 45% in the actual primary. He might get 50, and I think that would kind of be the end for any case against him. But, realistically, this is going to be closer. And Haley has really coalesced the support because in Iowa they split, 21 to 19%. So they combined for 40%. It was pretty even. In New Hampshire they're doing a similar thing. They're combining for 36%, but it's much more, slanted towards one side. Haley's, getting the vast majority of this vote. And, for a while, Chris Christie was polling even, or was roughly polling even with DeSantis. He was actually, I think, leading him in some cases. Yeah, he was at 9%. DeSantis was at, let's see. He's at 10.5 right here. DeSantis at 10.2. So, Chris Christie dropped out, and I think it's going to likely help Haley by dropping out in New Hampshire because that was his biggest bastion of support. So I think a lot of that comes from Christie, but realistically, DeSantis is probably going to get third. Probably be distant. If you look at the polls, he's 25% behind Haley. He's Haley's closer to Trump than he is to Haley. So, that just says a lot about the state of the race. And the other polling websites will say similar things. If you go 270 to win, Haley's at 30, DeSantis is at 6, so it's a bit closer, but not really. And so, I would be expecting a closer race here. Again, Trump will win. I would be very shocked if Haley were able to actually pull this out, but she has the momentum. She's going to likely, this is the spot she's been investing in. DeSantis, it was Iowa, but New Hampshire was the spot she was like, okay, this is where we're going to make our stand. This is where we're going to, show this is a competitive primary. And in New Hampshire, I really think that she's going to really, really prioritize it. And she has been doing that, and she will over the course of the next 7-8 days because that's what's going to really matter. So going forward, I think there's a chance DeSantis drops out after New Hampshire if he does as poorly as the polls are predicting, because if he does that, there's really no way he can win. And I think he might, if he really doesn't want Trump to win the nomination, I think you might know that that's the only way he can do it, is by, throwing his support behind Haley, or even if he doesn't endorse her, I think hoping his supporters break for her. So, it's going to be interesting. I'm going to make a official prediction for New Hampshire, but For now, I guess my takeaways from Iowa were that Trump did about as well as we thought. I think he's going to be the nominee. I think we've known that all along. And I really do believe that, especially in the case of New Hampshire, it's now or never for DeSantis and Haley. And I think DeSantis is in a weak spot. I think he was always doomed, after he really fell in the spring of last year, which is a very early time for a campaign to peak, by the way. It's crazy just how far, how badly he fell. But walking into Iowa, I think his only chance of staying in the race in the long run was to do really well, get a second place significantly ahead of Haley, and he got second place, but only by one delegate and only by 2,000 votes. And now he's going to get smacked in New Hampshire unless the polls are very wrong. And I think that he is on his way to dropping out, if not after New Hampshire, likely after the next primary. So to me, this is a Haley versus Trump race. She has a better long-term campaign than DeSantis does. Trump will still win. I have no doubt about that in my mind. But to me, it's definitely going to be more interesting to watch New Hampshire than it was Iowa, just because there's more at stake. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, so you can get my thoughts on New Hampshire when I release them, likely the Sunday or the Monday before. And I will see you all in the next one.